Thanks. All right, so when we say if you have a double joined the expression, the operation still go as integer until it reaches a double. First time it reaches double, then that operation becomes a double, okay? So if it's, so you have like two expressions, two operations are involved in the integer only, it will be integer and then go on until it reaches a double value. All right, so keep that in your mind. So today we're going to review Unit 2. Okay, so let's go to Unit 2 then. So Unit 2 review is objects, methods, strings, and math. Okay, mostly it's talking about we need to use in object. So what's the weight of Unit 2? So explore reference data as a way to represent real world objects in the digital world and discover methods to perform more complex operation. So that is the purpose of this unit. So the weight is about 5 to 7.5%. It's about like 3 questions, multiple choices. Okay, 3 multiple choices in section 1. Of course, in the free open responses, it will involve the using object as well. But in the in the multiple choices questions, so it's about like 3 questions, maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 4. Okay, something like that. If it's a 4, it's almost 10%. So that's why I say it's about 2 to 3 multiple questions. You usually you have like a 40 multiple choices in the section 1. All right, so this is very abstract, right? So when we talk about that, what does it exactly mean? So let's move on to the next slide then. So this is a topics that it will test. So objects and classes as ways to describe instances, attributes, and behaviors. All right, so let me just test you. So when we learn the classes or objects in Java, when we say behaviors, usually what does it mean? What does it refer to? You know, there are members in the class, right? So what does it refer to usually? Do you refer to like the field, properties, attributes, or you refer to the methods? Colin, you remember?
I think of like some attributes and methods. Wait, let me think.
Usually when we see behaviors, we talk about the methods, the action, okay? Usually how this class will behave. So we talk about the methods. You can use the methods. But you know, we do not be that strict. Usually people will not ask you for the definition of what behavior is. That's just a convention when people talk about the behavior of the class, usually they refer to the methods. It may not just refer to like one method. It's the phenomena of the methods in the class. Okay, So we see that's the behavior of the class. Creating objects by calling constructors with and without parameters. So you need to know how to create an instance, okay, of the object, or the instance of a class. So that means you create an object. Utilizing class libraries, including integer and double, okay? So these are two class libraries. They are actually the wrapper class. I think we probably talk about in the very beginning of Java level 1 class. So we say there are two wrapper classes. Actually, you have multiple. All the primitive type, it has a corresponding wrapper class. Primitive type is not an object, okay? It's not in a class. It's just called a primitive type. So if you want to treat it as a class, then you need to use its wrapper class, okay? So integer is one, double is another one. We do have more, okay? So let's move on to the topics. The test topics, it will have also defining an object's behavior using methods. So now you understand it when we talk about behavior. So including static and the math class, right? So we will spend more time on this one in my following slides. Okay, so we will talk about more on this, and I will have some question on it. Also calling non-static void methods with and without parameters. Non-static, how do you call it? If it's a static, how do you call it? You must to keep that in your mind. And then we need to use a string object and its methods. So you see here we're talking about 4 classes already, 2 wrapper classes, integer, double. And here is the math classes, okay? And then we talk about the string class, string object. So then using application program interfaces and libraries. So, you know, probably it's abstract to you when we talk about the API, application program interface. What does it mean? Actually, you know, when we learn Java in our classes, I bring you guys a lot to the Java doc on the website. Actually, those documents are very good documents for an API. So API is the application program interface. So in a class, if you have a class, you list its method, you list its fields, and those things are the API. It is the interface for you to use this class. So we call that an API. So if you develop an application, and it's a very complicated application, but your application will allow other people to develop their application and make their application communicate to your application. So your application can use the data, or your application can transfer data to that application. So usually they will need an interface. So interface document. So what is the interface document? The Java doc is a very good example of the interface document. It tells you how to use that class. Okay, tells you how to use that class. So when we look at the Java class document, then that is in the API. Okay, it's in the class or object level API. Of course, if you talk about the application program interface, you may have a library, have multiple classes. So you talk about each every one. I tell people how to use it. Okay, that is an API. Move on. So once you have that, okay, once you have that, so let's see the relationship between class and object. Usually we see a class is a template or blueprint for an object. Okay, an object is an instance of a class. Object is an instance. So when you create an object, you create it from a class, right? In your code, when you use the method, so we will talk about that. What is an instance method? What is a class method? We will talk about that later on. So a method is the behavior, and then the attribute is the state of an object. So just keep those in your mind, help you understand the Java. So object is the parent. See, when I see this object, actually this is a class, a Java class called object. So this one is the parent class of all in Java. Okay. Any other classes, they are the child of this one. They could be the great grandchild of object. Okay. It could be if you derive your class from another class, not from object, then it will be the grandchild. Okay. So that means object is the root class in Java. All right, move on. So now let's do some knowledge check. So what does static mean? So let me get a Hagen.
Doesn't it mean like it can't be changed?
You can change it. Static, you can change it. Final, you cannot change it. So let me ask Thomas.
It's the same for every instance.
I can barely hear you, Thomas.
It's the same for every instance. Well, it can be accessed without creating.
Um, okay, so I do have a slide to talk about this. So I will ask someone to read that later on. But let me just skip this one. Okay, what does static mean? Okay, what is an instance method, or what is an instance variable? Evan.
So instance is you have to create you have to create an object of the instance method's class before you can call the method.
Yes, you are there. Yeah, so when I list those three questions, actually all those three questions are related to this word, static. Okay, so instance is a counterpart of the class. So let's just go to the next slide then. What? Let me get one student to help me read this one. So Jin Kang, remind, read it aloud, read it aloud.
The keyword static indicates that the particular member belongs to a type itself. Rather than an instance of that type, this means that only one instance of that static method is created when which is shared across all instances of the class.
Right. So it's very important, okay? It is very important to understand what static means. Static in Java, that means when you use it and when you use it to define a member of a class. A member of a class can be an attribute or a method, right? Once you use a static, that means in the whole application in your Java environment for that application, it will only have one instance created for it. And this one belongs to the class. And it is shared by all instances. Even you create 1,000 objects of that class. Let's say we have a class called a bicycle. So the bicycle has a static member called a serial number. Okay? So this serial number now is shared by all the instances you created from class bicycle. Once you change it from one instances, all other instances will see that change. So that's you must be very careful about it. So when you change an instance member, it is shared. It is shared across the entire application, shared by all the instances of that type. So that's why let me go back to the previous slide. So when we say an instance method of variable, it is a method or variable that is declared or defined without the static keyword. That means you cannot access it unless you create an instance of this class. Unless you create an object, then you will be able to access that method or that attribute. But if you created use a static keyword, that becomes a class method or class variable or class attribute. You do not have to create an object of it. You can directly using this method by calling its name, and then you use the class name to qualify it. You just directly use the class name, and then the method name. Okay, and you can use it. So that's what we call it a class method or class variable. Right. So hopefully this provides you a clear idea about static. Any question? Let me pause here. Any question? Okay. If there is no question, let's move on. All right. So we talk about constructors. So in this unit, you will be tested on constructors. So let me ask you the question. So is constructor method when is it called? So let me get Sophia.
It's only called when you're creating the object.
Yeah. So what about this question then? Huh?
No, I'm not sure.
Okay, let me get another student to help me then. So I can. This is a yes or no.
I'm not sure, but no.
All right. So a construct is a method. It is a method, but it has some uniqueness. So what is unique about a constructor? Does anyone remember the uniqueness of it? There's no right or wrong answer to this one. So just talk about that. What do you remember? The unique. What is what do you remember about a construct? Just talk about that. All right. So let me. Okay, Thomas.
You have to use the new keyword before it.
Not to use the new keyword. Is that what you mean?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that is one. Yes. So when you call it, you use the new. Okay. Okay. So what else? Does anyone remember? Ivan. Anything you think that it may be unique? It does not have to be. I said there's no wrong or right answer.
You can't add the keywords like final and static on them. I don't think they don't return types.
Correct. You already get two of them. So it does not have a type. You do not have the type keyword before the construct. Okay, it does not return a value. Okay, it does not do return. All right, what else? There's another thing, to it. And if nobody remembers it, then I can talk about it. So the constructor bears the same name as the class name. It must be of the same. Okay. The constructed name must be of the exact name of the class. Okay. All right. What happens if the class does not have a construct? Colin.
It doesn't have default.
A default one, I think, will be generated. I'm pretty sure.
Yep. So if it does not have it, the Java virtual machine will provide a default one. We will spend a little bit more time on it later on. Okay. So even you do not declare a constructor in your class, a default one will be supplied. Okay, what happens when you create a new instance of a class of which the constructor has parameters? maybe this is not a great question. What I really want you to know is that if the constructor has parameters, then you create a new instance, you will have to supply values to the constructor. You will have to, okay? If the constructor has parameters in it. So then you have to supply values. So that's what I'm trying to get from you. All right, so let's move on. So I've already answered this one, so I'm not going to talk about it. So do you define the type of the constructor or set a void to the constructor? No. Okay, so I've already answered it. So let's move on. A constructor is used to create an instance of a class with the given parameters. Okay? The constructor must have the same name as the class. The constructor signature consists of the constructor name and the parameter list. Actually, this can be applied to any method. The signature of the method consists of the name of the method and the parameter list. That's a signature. So that's why we see the constructor is also a method. It's a special method. Okay? One. Methods review. A method is declared in the class. Methods define what an object of that class can do. So that's why we see the class behavior is a method. The method signature consists of the method name and the parameter list. I just talked about it. All right. So now let's just see some examples. So let me talk about overloading. So I got a student to read this for me, okay? What does overloading mean? So Sophia, read this part, I highlight.
A constructor or method is said to be overloaded if there are different method signatures within the same method name.
So that means, for the same method, you have different parameters. So the signature is different. So that's why we see it's overloaded. Okay, the parameter difference exists in one of these two situations. Different number of parameters, the order of the parameter types. The name of the parameter does not match. Okay, if the first one you call the name, it's a string, and then you use a string, you call it ID, it really doesn't match. Okay, doesn't matter. It matters is that how many parameters and the order of the type, that matters. Keep that in your mind. You see here is an example of signatures for an overloaded constructor. Imagine that you have a constructor called a rectangle. This belongs to a class rectangle. So you have two parameters here. You have 4 here, and you have 5 here, but they have the same name, rectangle. They all have the same name, rectangle. Okay, so that's why we see it is overloaded. I will ask you to look at a real example, and I think I talked about it in my Java class. So we will go there. All right, go to the string class and take a look at its constructors. So can you guess all go there? just type in Google and then say Java string. Okay, just do this. And it will give you all the choices. It really doesn't matter because a string class existed in the very first version of Java. So either one you choose, that's okay. So let's just choose this one, okay? And then you see here the constructors. So this you see you can directly use an input parameter list. And then you have all those constructors. They all create a new instance of the string class. Then you guys just spend like a couple minutes, take a look at this. And this situation or this phenomena, we call it an overloaded class or an overloaded method. Overloaded. Go ahead, and I want you to spend like a 1 minute on it. Go ahead, go to your web browser, type in Java string, and then take a look at it. You see, that's why when you create a string object, you can do all this. This is the overloaded construct. So we will come back to this website again because the string is one of the classes tested in unit 2. So I mentioned 4 classes, right? Integer, double, math, then string. Okay. All right. Move on. All right. So let's do a knowledge check. So why would this program fail? Here's with this one. And then if you know the answer, raise your hand. Okay, Sophia knows. Ivan knows. Thomas knows. All right, so let me get Ivan now.
Since the say hello method takes in a string as a parameter, you need to give a string or it's not gonna do anything.
Good. Because the string, the method signature that has a parameter there. You do not provide it, then it will have a problem. Okay, that's a 1. So, Sophia, do you have anything else to add?
No, that's also what I spotted.
Okay. How about you, Thomas? Do you have anything to add?
Do we have to make an instance for the
Exactly.
for the method because it's not static?
Exactly. Do you guys agree? Because it is not a class method, you have to have an instance first. So that means you have to create an instance of this class. Then you can use this method. Very good. Very good on it. Okay. So tell me why A is not the choice. All right, Hagen. So can you speak up?
A private method can be accessed within the class.
Yes, exactly. So even it's private in the same class, in the class definition, okay? So that class, then it is accessible, it is available. You can use it, okay? All right. So let's move on to the next question. So the now keyword. The keyword now indicates that a reference is not attached to any object. So if you said anything to now, any object to now, okay, that means it has not been allocated a memory slot to it. So the system does not know what it is. Does not know what it is. So trying to use a now reference to call a method or access an instance variable causes a now point exception to be thrown. So the AP exam likes to put this on, okay, multiple choice questions. So be aware. So let's see an example. Knowledge check. So before we show the question, try to understand this code and find all the possible errors that could happen. Okay. So you see, this is a static method. All right. Static method do work. So just think about where it may have a problem. Okay. So hopefully you read through this code. Then now let's go to the choices. All right. So anyone can talk about that? Okay, so let's go back. You see here, A could be a noun object, okay? B also could be a noun object. It may not have been initialized. And then you see here B, you use I and J. Okay, you really did not check if A has that many J's, or if B has that many I's. That means it could go out of bound. You see here, you only check the length of A, and here you only check the length of SI. So you really do not know if you have I and J in B. You may not have that many, right? So that's why this could go out of bound. So that's those are the two merger errors you could run into, the exceptions you could run into. Okay. Anything else to add by the class? Or do you have a question on it? Okay, if not, let's move on. All right, so let's talk about a string. String are immutable. String object can be concatenated with the plus sign or plus equal sign, which creates a new string object. I think we may not be able to finish this. It is fine. So you see, when you do concatenation, you use those two. And then you, of course, you have another method to do it, okay? So string objects can be concatenated with primitive values or objects, in which case the toString method will be called on the value or object, okay? So let's move on. I want you guys to refresh your mind. If not, I really want you guys to go back to this website. And these are the methods, and they are very important, and you may get tested. Okay, so compare to. Okay, if I have a string, say string A compared to B. Okay, so something like this. So if A is larger than B, so what do I got? What will be returned if A larger than B? Income, what value you will got? What value will be returned if A larger than B? If you use this method. I want you guys all go back to this website. Now you see I'm at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 methods. Go to that website and read those 6 methods, okay? Keep this in your mind. I give you guys 2 minutes. I want you to remember, try to look at all those 6 methods. read those 6 methods. All right, I want to come back now. So let's talk about this slide. So difference between equal and the equals method. All right. So in general, both equals and equal operate are used to compare objects to check equality. But here are some of the differences between these two. So what are the differences? So let me move on. Main difference between the equals method and this operate is that one is method and the other is an operate. Okay, that's obvious. We can use the operator for reference comparison. So that actually is address comparison. When we talk about address, that means in the memory slot. You both point to the same slot of memory. If you both point to that same slot of memory, yes, it is true. If not, even you have the same content in it, it is not true. It's false. And the equals method is for content comparison. So in simple words, the operator checks if both objects point to the same memory location, whereas equals evaluates to the comparison of values in the object. So when we talk about this, I really want you guys to be aware of the concept when you use a method. We did not talk about this in our Java class. So when you have a parameter list, right? And then you have the method there. And then if the method is called, you always supply values to those parameters. So usually in Java, okay, that operation or the value you supplied, we call it the pass by value. So you say x equal to 5. And then now, okay, x equal to 5, y equal to 6. I have a method called addition, and the addition have parameter x and y. So you do provide x equal to 5, y equal to 6 to this method. Actually, pass in is the value, so 5 and 6. But sometimes when you pass an object in, right, that object point to an instance. So if you change the value in that object in this method, other method using this object, we will see that change. So that is passing by reference. Okay. So let me just go to the website. So I want you guys to read this one. I hope this will help you guys. Let me just go there. I should have just opened it to make it easy. All right, so let me just go there. So, okay, this paragraph. So Hagen, can I get you to read this paragraph?
Java is a pass-by value language. This means that when we pass a primitive value like an integer, we are passing a copy of that value. So if we change the value inside a constructor, the value outside the constructor doesn't change. However, when we are passing a reference type, we are passing a reference to a data slot. If we modify the data of an object in a constructor, for example, the object changes outside the constructor as well.
Okay, so keep that in your mind. Okay, so it's very important to remember. It is a passing by value, but when you pass in a reference, any action within this method, it makes change to that reference. It is visible outside of that method. Okay, so let me just move on, see if I finished this one or not. If I finished it, I know I will stop here. Okay, I think I finished that. All right, so let me just stop here, and I do not give you homework for this kind of class. I really just come to review the test topics with you all and help you understand it, remember it. And in session 2, we will have a lot of like a access practice test. Okay, so here we just do review, and the next week we may have some access for you to do. I will combine unit 1 and unit 2. Let's do some access on it. All right, so let me return this class back to Ms. He.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Yan. So everything's fine. There's no other thing I can